On June 3rd, 2016, I had a social media event. I was an Instagram influencer, and the event was a golf tournament. I posted on social media to ask followers to come, so when this guy showed up, it didn't surprise me. Sure, the tickets were $250, but for some reason, that didn't click with me. It was a drinking event as well, and he showed up at least tipsy, but having a good time. He was also an Instagram model who I knew online. He asked me out on a date for after the tournament. I was a single mom, and because of the event, my parents were watching the kid until the next day. I said sure to him. We went off on the date, went to a bar, and grabbed some food. The man was handsome, but mostly charming as heck. We had a beer, and then in his car, he offered some weed. I rarely smoke, but decided what the heck. We hotboxed, then went off to the bar. He was friendly with everyone and made me laugh quite a few times. Then off to the liquor store for some more alcohol, and finally to his house. I was drunk and high, so it was easy to sleep with me. He had a bunk bed, and I remember during everything that he was very selfish, aggressive, and I was scared. I didn't stop him out of fear. He had driven and my car was still at the golf tournament location, and we were far too far for me to afford an Uber back to my car. The next morning, I went to the restroom, and afterward, noticed a long pipe coming from the toilet after I flushed. He came out upset, because it was to water the weed him and his roommate were growing. I didn't know, or was too drunk and high to still to click. I apologized deeply, and again was scared. We came downstairs, and I looked at the wall and decor for the first time. Knives and weapons were used as decorations all over the house. I waited for him to have breakfast, and to drive me back to my car, trying not to show panic. In the car, I knew I needed an excuse that wouldn't hurt his feelings. I told him I had a blast, and I'm so bummed because I really like him. But my child's father passed away when he was 1, which is true, and I can't have CPS take him away because I'm around someone growing weed. I told him I didn't care about the weed and didn't want him to change, so it was a bummer. I let him make out with me one last time, and he dropped me off. I was shaking as I drove off because of the vibes. The very next day, after he dropped me off, he met a girl that was an 18-year-old mini-me. He dated her for 3 weeks. She dumped him, and he stalked her like crazy. So much so, he was arrested a few times. In September of the same year, he gets out of jail the last time and heads to the bar. He meets a girl there and takes her home. He ends up murdering her, chopping up her body, cutting her heart out, and setting it on fire. Once I heard that news, I was shattered. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking that could have been me. I'm so sorry that girl had to go through what happened. I really just don't know what to say, but I'm just so glad that it wasn't me. That man was a psychopath and deserves to be behind bars. Back in 2019, I was an 18-year-old female at the time. I decided to download Tinder a few months after a rough breakup. I was very inexperienced with dating and pretty shy, so it seemed unlikely that I would meet a potential partner in person. Anyways, after a few matches that led to nothing, I came across a profile of someone that I found very attractive. He was a 21-year-old male. We matched and exchanged Snapchats and continued to set up our first date. Our first date went relatively normal, and it was enjoyable. We saw a movie, and by the end of it, I felt like we hit it off. However, our relationship was extremely short-lived. Not long after I had agreed to be his girlfriend, and this was about a month or so of going out, he began to behave very erratically, and would sometimes fall completely silent in the middle of a conversation. He also ignored me and tried to ask him what was wrong. He became hot-tempered. He slammed doors and speeding off the road when he was mad. I started to feel really uncomfortable about our relationship. This went on for about a few weeks, until one night, when we were on our way to have dinner downtown. He fell silent mid-conversation. I became extremely anxious as we pulled into a nearby parking garage, wondering what I had done to upset him. As we parked, I decided to ask him what was wrong. He didn't answer. When I asked him again, he shouted at me to shut the F up. I was completely frozen for a moment, but I finally got up the courage to tell him we were done, and I gathered my belongings from the car and walked over to the nearest coffee shop to call an Uber. It was a fairly late night, so I walked as fast as I could, hoping he wouldn't follow me. When I made it to the shop, I noticed I had several missed calls from him. When I made it home that night, I blocked him on all social media and decided to never contact him again. I'm fairly familiar with the dynamic of toxic relationships, and I knew that if he could talk to me that way, completely unprompted, it was likely that he was capable of much more. About a week goes by, as I start to settle my emotions a bit. I decided to confide in a friend, who had never met the guy, about what happened, feeling completely embarrassed. A few nights later, I received a text from the same friend. It was a screenshot of an Instagram DM from someone she didn't follow, my now ex. It says something to the effect of, "Hey, I'm sorry we're having to meet like this, but mine," and he said my name, "is ignoring me, and I needed to talk to her." My heart sunk. I decided to message all my friends separately and let them know what happened, just in case. Later that week, I started receiving several DMs from various accounts, all without profile pictures or posts. Eventually, I gave in and responded to one asserting that the relationship was over and that I didn't want to hear from him again. I blocked the accounts immediately afterwards. As time went on, without hearing a word in weeks, I figured I had reached the end of the situation, until one morning, while I walked to my car, I noticed something dangling around the handle of my door. It was a necklace I gave him. He had only picked me up once from my house before. I thought the thought of him driving to my house, which was about a half hour from his place, earlier that night freaked me out. I was shaken up for a while. It was by no means an expensive necklace, and I had the exact same one. I kept it though, maybe thinking that that was his way of showing that we were done. 2 months later, I was working my job at a small boutique near my house. I was used to answering the phone several times a day, so when the phone rang, I thought nothing of it. But when I picked up, I immediately recognized his voice. He started rambling about wanting a sweatshirt back, but I hung up before he could finish. That was the last time I ever would tell somebody I was dating where I worked. I was completely losing it at this point, especially considering he had never called me at work while we were together. I didn't even know how he knew that I was working that time of the day. I told my older sister the situation, and she, being very protective, decided to message him herself. She told him to leave me alone, and even offered to give him back the sweatshirt for me. He refused, and insisted on meeting up with me in person to get it. When it became abundantly clear that he didn't actually want the sweatshirt back, she threatened him with a PPO, to which he never responded. That was the last time I ever heard from him, and thank God it was. I had a memory resurface recently, which I had to double check with my mom for reassurance, and she confirmed it is unfortunately true. It was triggered by someone on the street outside my job, peeking inside through a very small window. They were harmless, but the sight of their face suddenly reminded me of a memory I had long forgotten from my first house I lived in as a child. We moved out of this house when I was 6 years old. The fence was built around the time I was old enough to start walking. but my parents were still always wary of letting me outside until we moved. I used to resent it, but now I think I understand why. Apparently, we had a neighbor a few doors down who was a registered sex offender. He had been required to notify his neighbors via social worker when he moved in. He had a habit of doing odd, off-putting things around the neighborhood. He once sprinted across the street and left a human-sized dent in our neighbor's garage door. He had also walked into another neighbor's back door, trembling, and asked to be held by her. She kicked him out and called the police when she discovered he also had an erection. I found a lot of this out through researching his name after my mom confirmed the story. I also found his Facebook page, which included a photo of him, and sealed any doubt in my mind I had imagined it. The sight of him, even through a screen, immediately made me nauseous. My memory tells me that I was sitting in our living room watching TV when I felt someone watching me. It was the middle of the day, and I turned to look out our front windows to see a man with his face and his hands pressed against the glass. That same man I saw in the Facebook page. He was smiling at me with huge eyes and an even more alarming huge grin. I remember being scooped up in someone's arms and carried away into another room. My mom confirmed that this had been my grandma, who was babysitting me at the time. She was my hero and saved me from a lot of damage. I'm just so glad that we moved. Hey everybody, if you made it this far, thanks for watching the video. If you can, hit the like button so other people could see it, and consider subscribing to the channel to never miss any more videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.